Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another badass episode of High Vibe It. We are really excited to have you here with us every week. We just love tuning into your guys' energy, answering your questions telepathically, and being that source of inspiration and sparkle to start off your week. So here we are. We have an amazing guest. As always, we're bringing you the best perspectives and voices and fun people to chat about cool High Vibe It stuff. So today we have Miss Efia Sulter, and she is another manifesting queen to join this panel of manifesting badasses. She's a conscious creator and coach, and she also has a podcast called the Manifest Edit Podcast. So, Efia, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so looking forward to today's conversation.
Yes, I'm so looking forward to hearing your beautiful accent for the next 45 minutes of my life.
But she doesn't have an accent. We have an accent. She talks normal. We're the ones that have an accent. Efia, I'm so happy to have you. I know it's been a long time coming, but it's in perfect timing. How did you come to do this work? What kind of called you to it? What's your story?
I think that there are kind of multiple points in my life that have led to where I am today. I think there was no one straight path, although I guess when you look back, you're like, oh, I can see how all of those points lined up. But I definitely grew up with more of a spiritual inkling. And it's funny because you don't really when you're in the moment you're not really thinking about it, but looking back I'm like, oh yeah, wait, we did have crystals around the house all the time, and yeah, we were doing all of these things that now looking back were probably kind of spiritual. But yeah, initially for the first few years of my life I was Christian, but then at age 10 we became Buddhist when we moved next door to a Tibetan monastery. And so growing up there was definitely a very different way of life, and the people that we could spend time with and hear from. And so when I was older, turning to spirituality, like it never really felt like that far a reach for me. And although like I would no longer consider myself to be religious, I think there's something that I've taken from both religions I was a part of. And for me, what I love about spirituality is just kind of adapting it to your own beliefs, your own desires. And I think it's just about bringing out that innate magic that's already within you and just building that deep sense of connection with the divine. And so in my journey to building that deep sense of connection, it really changed my life. I had gone through such a difficult, not just a difficult period, but difficult life, honestly. And when we did move at age 10, also around that time, my mom got sick and her health deteriorated quite rapidly for the next 4 years, until she passed away one day. And this was when I was 14. My little brother was 3. My sister was 15 at this time. And because we had been adopted, my mom was our adoptive parent and she was a single mom, that meant at that point we were orphaned because we actually didn't have any other family to live with. And so I think, I always say, well, that was the moment that changed my life. But actually, even before then, from the age of 10, like beginning to take on roles that a child wouldn't be taking on, and missing out on your childhood and all of those little moments. So people say, oh, you have such an old soul. And I'm like, thanks, it's the trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very challenging period of my life. And after my mum passed away, I also had my gran pass away and a friend pass away from school. So it felt like there was just like so much grief and heaviness. And moving through the world, I didn't really want to look at it. I just wanted to get by. And I thought, like, if I allowed myself to feel grief, if I allowed myself to be sad, that I was going to fall behind. And I just couldn't let that happen because I didn't want to go back into the care system again. I didn't want to feel like I didn't have any options ahead of me. And so I just kept pushing forward. And then it got to a point where I was in my early 20s where, if you just continue to suppress things, eventually they're going to come out, they're going to blow up. And ultimately that's what happened for me. And I went for a really intense period of anxiety, depression, and just felt really lost in terms of what my soul's purpose was. And it was a real moment of spiritual awakening at that moment where I felt like you can either keep going the way that you're going and be really miserable, or change something. And something had to change because I just couldn't go on the way that I was. And yeah, 5 years later, it's like my whole world has changed. Like so many things in my world have changed. And I think part of that is making a commitment and a decision. It's one thing to make a decision, but staying committed to that decision, and putting yourself at the center of your world, even though there may be other people, whether you have kids, your partners, like they're important. That's not to say they're not important, but you have to put yourself center of your world so that you can give the most to yourself and everyone else.
There's so many, thank you for sharing that. There's so many things that I heard in your story that kind of like struck me. One of those things is I really do think it's valuable and important that you said, I just wanted to get by. I thought that if I stopped and felt into everything that, you should have been feeling into, that you would get left behind. And I can so relate to this. People feel like if they were to go introspective and really feel and sit with their emotions, that they might get stuck there forever. But that's actually quite the opposite. Once you actually can listen and hear the voice of your emotions and kind of welcome it home, so to speak, welcome yourself home. It's just a moment, and then you're able to kind of move through it. Whereas if you don't, in that suppression, you're absolutely right. It's going to find a way out in one way or another because it's what's best for you. So thank you for saying that. I also really am curious, what did you do when your mom passed away and then your family around you kind of passed? Like, what did you do? You were 14. I mean, did you become head of house at 14? Or I guess you had a sibling that was 15, right?
Yeah. So what actually ended up happening was that at the point when my mom had passed away, I was just like feeling kind of overwhelmed with shock, and I'd phoned one of my friend's parents because we were like quite close. I kind of saw her as like an auntie figure, and I told her like, I just don't know what to do right now. And so she came around and she was like, don't worry about anything, I'm gonna sort anything out. And honestly, at that point, like, and I guess because I was still in shock, I was like, oh, we'll just like go and live with my gran. My gran's like 82. There was no way that was ever gonna happen, but I was just like, okay, we'll just live with gran, that'll be fine. But no, what ended up happening was my friend's mom ended up taking my sister and I in, and we lived with her and her kids until we went to uni.
Oh, thank goodness you had people around you, huh? Like I could imagine the fear of going back into the system would be just the last thing you wanted to do. Thank you. Sorry, it was too personal, but I had to know the end of that because I can't imagine.
No.
Oh my goodness. And then one of the other things that stuck out to me was that when you started embracing your experiences and sitting with your emotions and things like that, it was complete cracking open probably. And also on the other side of it, as you said, like your life looks completely different, and you couldn't I'm going to assume here that once we're able to kind of break through and get to the other side of it, did you or did you not like have a moment looking back where you're like, oh yeah, that was all part of it? Like, have you ever had that moment? Do you view it in that way at all?
I don't think so, but I think that multiple parts in my journey have like caused me to relate better to people and have like a deeper level of empathy, because on top of like anxiety, depression, I was also struggling with from like 18 an undiagnosed chronic illness, which I now know to be endometriosis, but at that time I had no idea what it was, and it was completely debilitating. And so I look back on that experience now, and also how many of my clients have chronic illness. I'm like, oh, so this is definitely lending to me being able to support you on a deeper level. But I'm definitely not someone who believes like everything happens for a reason, but I believe that we can look back and find lessons if we choose to.
Which is very important. I mean, it's for me so much better to be like, okay, what did I take from this versus, well, it's just shit and I hate it and whatever. Like, I feel like there's so much more value if we were to look. Now, look, I'm not saying that your mom was supposed to die or anything, but what I am saying is with your experiences and with you just making that decision to bring all parts of you to center and make yourself the center of your world could not be more potent in that transformation. So I think that's so great that you mentioned that for everybody who can relate to this idea of maybe I don't want to feel it today. Maybe I'll wait somewhere down in the vague future and it'll all work itself out. But there is work to be done. So thank you for sharing your story. It was an incredible journey that you just took us on.
I'm just like feeling for your past self. I just want to give a hug, like 14-year-old you, like, oh, that's so tough. And like, I know in my journey, I found grief to be one of the most hard things to heal from and process, even though it's a natural occurrence. Like, we don't have to work hard at it, but it's like, just when you think you're over it, you're not. And it goes like in circles and waves, right? So you're like, oh, I'm feeling better. We're good now. Yay. And then it's like grief hits you again with another wave, another tsunami. And it feels like am I ever gonna not be grieving? You know,
Yeah.
it's hard, it's tough. These days, now that you're obviously feeling better, doing well, I'm sure, or I guess I shouldn't assume, but I would ask, like, does grief still come up for you in waves, or is it different now that you've processed a lot of it, or what's that like?
Yeah, I love the analogy that you use, and it's something that I refer to myself is that it's not like the ways are ever going to go away. It's just the way that you navigate them becomes differently. So for sure, like birthdays, Mother's Days, Father's Days, Christmas, I'm like, oh, it's definitely an activating moment for me. But it doesn't hurt as much as it used to. But there's still like a lot of grief and sadness, or even in random moments, like I'll be watching a movie and the kids will be doing something with their parent. I'm like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing
Uh,
people did. And it just feels like a moment that you're missing out on. So yeah, I definitely do have moments. And I think it's important to share that. Like it's never like grief is something, I don't think it's something you can be healed from. I would never
Right.
really use those words to describe grief. I would just say that your relationship can change. So it's one that's not completely taking over your life, and that there is no um it's definitely not a linear process either. You can think like, oh yeah, like I feel completely fine past anything, and then you'll have like one of those moments. Like for example, my sister's getting married this year, and I think it's been hitting her quite hard, like knowing that my mom's not going to be there. And so there are all these moments that you're going to get to, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to use the resources and the tools that I have with me in this moment, and I also know that it's okay to feel whatever I'm feeling.
yeah.
Can we
So
talk
that,
about that?
yeah,
We
that
need to
leads me
talk
into
about
like
that.
another question slash topic of your relationship to the more heavy, dense energies and emotions. How do you utilize that in your manifestation practice? Because I know like I have my way, so I'm curious about your way.
So when I first began my conscious manifestation journey, my spiritual journey, I was like very into the realm of positive thinking. And I thought if I had anything outside of that, that was gonna like take away from what I was manifesting. And also I felt like it meant something about me. Like I wasn't good enough. Well, everyone else is thinking this way. Why am I not thinking this way? And I remember at a point where I was particularly depressed in my life, like I would gauge how well I was doing by how many days it had been since I last cried. And now I know that that's certainly not helpful. I'm crying
Toxic
less, but
positivity. Boom, boom, boom,
yeah.
boom. Yeah. Yeah. We talk about
Um,
that a lot.
so I think the heavier, the more weighty emotions are very interesting, because now it's not something that means like I'm veering off my path. It's just like, okay, this is another challenge that we get to move through. And it is one of those cliches that people are like, well, you get the biggest lessons out of the things that are challenging you. And I think in some ways it is true, because it shows you what you do need to work through or what's coming up. And it's not like these emotions are coming up because you don't know how to handle yourself. These emotions are coming up because there's a part of you that needs attention. And I think there's something very beautiful about the fact that our body has such an internal system that's like, hey, like this is what we need to look at today. This is what we need to look at today. Like the body is so cool when you actually think about all the different things that your mind and your body and your soul are responsible for. It's quite mind blowing.
I just did a hypnosis audio for thanking your body. And as I'm going through it, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna thank my body. Like, look at all the things it can do. And I think that's very important. Like, we don't really think about it as much as we probably should. Your body, your mind, your spirit, your heart, just, we're just so expansive. And I like that you said that, because it's something that we take for granted. My body does whatever I want it to, but it doesn't mean that it's no less miraculous than geez, any miracle in the world. It's just fantastic. But yes, I think that's important to feel those heavier emotions and know them as, this is my body, this is my mind trying to get my attention. What is it trying to say? Just simple questions like that. Yeah, I think it's great.
Also, I would add to that, like, just knowing that this is an experience that I came here for. I didn't only come to
Yeah.
experience what I wanted. I didn't only come to have everything be daisies and butterflies all the time. Like, I came to get my hands dirty in this life as a human, feel it all, embrace it all, go through it all, because I feel like we really are very curious. Like, oh, I want to know what that feels like. Oh, I want to experience this. Because, and I don't know if this is true for you, but I found like the deeper I go into any sort of uncomfortable or what most people would label like a negative emotion, I find that it expands my capacity also to contain light in my body. So as deep as I got into my depression when I was depressed and suffered through that, after that, I was able to go even further into joy and happiness and expansion, because there has to be almost like an equality on either side of the spectrum, right? So it's like the deeper you can feel in one direction, also the other direction. You're expanding in all directions, not just in one way. So I think when people can remember or realize that, they feel like, okay, it's not in vain. I'm not like
Yeah.
just going through the ringer for nothing. Like, it's a part of the journey. It's part of being a human. It's part of expansion. And it's only going to make you like better at mastering energy.
Right. And if we knew
Yeah, I
that
think
these feelings were temporary, I think it would help us navigate a lot better, because
Yeah.
as you said before, you didn't want to just get left behind, or you didn't want to be behind. And I can relate, because I didn't want to get stuck in those emotions, but that's not a real thing unless you consciously decide to stay in these negative emotions. But just navigating through them is the best thing you can do. Sorry, you were going to say something, Efia.
I was just going to say that the nature of duality is like, don't feel like because you're on the other end of the spectrum, or you're going through challenges, or you're going through a lot of hard times, that means you're doing anything wrong. Actually, what I have found for a lot of people, it's like they'll set out what they want to manifest, and then they're like, wait, why are all these challenges come up when I said this is like the opposite of what I wanted? And it's like, well, sometimes in order to grow to the next level that you actually do want, you're going to have all of these challenges that you face that prepare you for this. And I remember myself, I think it was like 6 months ago, I was experiencing like just challenge after challenge after challenge. I'm like, what is going on? And then I was like looking through my journal, and like 2 weeks before I'd written, I'm ready to up level, show me what I need to see. And I'm like, oh great. So this is it. Okay, thanks. So it doesn't always like, the gift doesn't always come like with a pretty package and a bow on top. It's not always going to look like how you want it to look, but sometimes it will be what you need it to be. And just going back to that duality and being able to feel everything so deeply, I think something that always I find helpful to remind me of the importance of feeling it all is like just watching a movie that makes you like really emotional, and you're getting really attached to the story of the character, and you're like, oh no, this is so sad, oh this is so great. And being able to feel those emotions, I think is such a visceral experience. And just as we have that in the movies, we have that in our own lives, where we're able to go between those multiple different planes. I just find it so fascinating.
Yes, yes. And can you dive into, because you mentioned briefly in your story how you fell into the law of attraction 101 trap that everybody falls into, which is like, if I
Yeah.
feel bad, I'm going to manifest bad things, right? That's like what you're taught, is like your vibe attracts whatever's going on. When all of us know that like authenticity is really key and non-resistance is key. So can you touch on maybe like if someone is stuck in that law of attraction 101 mindset, why it's not bad to feel bad, and how it can actually like, I don't know, expedite the manifestation process or support it in some way?
I think a lot of it comes down to getting really hung up on the phrase that thoughts become things. And you think like, and it's funny because people will attribute it to a negative thought, like, oh no, this is going to manifest, but you're not thinking, I'm going to be a millionaire, and like, oh, this is going to happen tomorrow, right?
Right.
Our
Why do you
thoughts
think your
typically
negative
don't.
thoughts are going to manifest and your positive ones
Yeah.
won't?
Exactly. So I think it's not as instantaneous as we perceive it to be. And also that thoughts is just like one small layer of what manifestation actually is, and not even the deepest layer. Like if you want to make true lasting change in your life, yes, thoughts are important, but ultimately it's your identity that is informing all of these things. And so when something is so deeply ingrained into you that that's your way of being, then that's where we want to look at kind of the subconscious reprogramming around that, not just like, oh, I had a passing thought that I'm a rubbish person, or I can never get what we want. Everyone has those thoughts. It would be like, I feel somewhat impossible to just be like purely on top of your game 100% of the time. But having those thoughts that are to the contrary allows you just to course correct and say, actually, this isn't in alignment with who I am. So when you're super grounded in your identity, and you know your identity to be whatever it is, like I'm a successful, powerful, loving person, then when you have the thoughts come up that challenge that, you can say like, no, I didn't, that doesn't fit with my worldview. And I think that's a much more productive way to approach changing the thoughts than like just trying to put out small fires all the time. It's like, well, let's actually look at what's fueling the fire to begin with.
I love
Yes.
this conversation.
I like
I
that
think
you
it's
brought
very
up
important.
I like that you brought up identity work, because I think it's not mentioned enough how much the subconscious mind, aka the identity police, plays a role in the manifesting process. Because it's like, oh, I want to do this, I want to be this, I want to have this, and your identity voice in the back of your head is like, well, you've never done that before, that's not who you are. Like, who are you to think that that's like what's on your path? You've never experienced it before, why would you experience it now? So what are some tips or starting places for people who want to get into, like, not even reinventing themselves or finding their identity, but just tapping into like their true power? Because I feel like everyone's identity is very powerful naturally. So it's just a matter of like embodying that and owning that which you already are.
Mm. I think for me, embodiment is probably one of the most important pieces of manifestation. And you're right, it's one that so often gets left out, which is why if you're at this point now and you're like, oh, I haven't been doing embodiment work, I haven't been diving into identity, that's not actually a bad thing. That's a really great thing, because it's like, whoa, if I did this, imagine like how different my reality would be. And so upon realizing this for myself, that I'd kind of been creating from this place of, oh, I want to have this, I want to have this. And so many of the things I was manifesting, I realized was actually pertaining to me wanting to appear to be a certain way, or feeling like I should be manifesting these things as opposed to what I actually truly desired for myself. And I was like, I'm not alone in this, because this is how I've been learning manifestation. So how many other people have been learning this way? So actually I built a 5-step manifestation framework around this. And the very first step of that is embodying the vibe of your higher self. And when people typically hear higher self, they're like, who I am now is not good enough. But to me, your higher self is your truest self. And I think that we all come into the world as our truest selves. And it's the BS of what we think we need to be or where we're supposed to be, or other people's beliefs that build on top of who we truly are. So embodying that is actually returning to your true nature. And I was actually speaking about this on Instagram the other day. If I was to return to my manifestation journey from the very beginning, this is exactly what I would do. And the first thing that I would do before like outlining all of these grand plans I want to have is just like doing a gut check and doing like a kind of like life assessment of who I am at this moment in time, like what my values, what my likes, what my dislikes, what things like annoy me, what things frustrate me, and just like getting really clear on who I am at the moment, because I don't think that we check in with ourselves that much. Some yeah, we'll be like, oh, I wish I could be this in the future, or oh, past me did this, but how often are you like, okay, this is me. Like if I was to an alien came down to earth and they were like, you're going to play Efia for the next year of your life, here's what you need to know, like, have I got all of those details ready to go for the alien assignment? Probably not. And I think there's so much to be learned from checking in with that present version of yourself, because number one, it allows you to get grounded in who you are, and you're probably going to learn that, wait, I actually am pretty an incredible, amazing human. I just don't take the time to acknowledge myself. But number two, if you do realize that there are some things right now that you would like to change, you're able to create a clearer path from who you are right now to who you want to be. And intentions are what fill in that gap, not the other way around of like, I'm just going to say I want loads of stuff and see what happens.
That's why I always tell people to ask yourself, why do you want it? Not just what you want. Why do you want it? Is it because you think you should have it? Is it because you want to impress somebody? And another great question that would have like helped your past self, which you've probably discovered already now, but anyone who's in that situation of like feeling pressure to manifest things to appear a certain way, you can ask yourself the question, like, if there was no other people in existence, would I still want that thing? Because sometimes the answer is like, actually, no, like I wouldn't need that. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't have that urge if there was nobody looking or nobody around.
Manifesting hacks.
Heck yeah, we got all the manifesting hacks. What are some of your like self-inquiry questions that you go into when you want to manifest something in your personal life? Like, what are some of the, I guess, like resistance releasers or ways that you find what's not happening?
One of my favorite questions that I like to come back to is, if I wasn't afraid of how I might be perceived, what things in my life would I do differently? And that's both in terms of external perceptions, which is like what other people think, but also the internal perceptions. Like we have that voice in our own head that's like, trying to veer us off course. And I think it's very important to just like continually check in, like, am I like actually like resisting my own success? And if I am, like, why is that? I also think it's good to check in, like, boundaries. I am obsessed with boundaries, especially when it comes to manifestation. I say to people all the time that, yeah, the law of attraction, attract what you want, but you also need to have the courage to set boundaries to repel what you don't want. And so if I'm checking in with my boundaries, yeah, I'll say like, what boundaries have I been setting lately? But like, what boundaries haven't I set? Why am I not setting those boundaries? What action haven't I been taking? And just like really having honest and open communication with myself. And I think the more you can have honest conversations with yourself, the less it needs to be like, oh, I need to do a really deep journaling session. But the more you can just, well, I talk to myself a lot in the day to day.
Oh, I talk to
The more
myself
you're just
constantly.
yeah, it's so great. So the more you just actually having those conversations, and I think journaling is a really great, powerful tool, but sometimes, you just want to be like, hey, is this resonating for me right now? No, it's not resonating for me right now. Oh, thank goodness I checked in with that. Great.
Yeah. And I want to talk to you about, I want to give an example and see if this is kind of what you're meaning. But I think that when we are trying to manifest a thing or some idea or some feeling, would a possible how do I say this? I don't know. Words are hard right now, but would it be a boundary thing to, you're trying to manifest, let's say, one job, but I'm going to use an example from a client. She will remain anonymous, and this will be a lot easier because now I can actually speak freely. She really wanted to go headfirst into her business and manifest money in that way. However, she was also a hairdresser, so she kept taking clients on the side, even though she did not like it and she didn't want to, but she kept accepting them because she was afraid to kind of let it go. And she finally ended up doing that. And oh my gosh, when she did, right? We all have those examples of like when I finally just took the leap of faith. But would that that would be an example of kind of loosening your boundaries a little bit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you can really think of it as the idea of your time and energy is so, so precious. And when
Mhm.
you're giving your time and energy to things that don't serve you, that is taking the time and energy away from the things that do serve you. And on TikTok, actually, I was having this conversation recently, which got a few people riled up, where I was like, stop trying to manifest your ex back. And people got
Oh my
kind of
gosh.
Oh
annoyed
my
that I said
God, we're
that.
so
Kelsey.
with you. People get so mad when you tell them not to manifest their ex. They freak out. So I know what it's like to be on the other side of that hate game. Okay,
I'm
continue.
surprised. I was like, really? You guys are advocating for these people? Okay. But what I was saying is like every moment you're trying to like manifest your ex back is taking away from someone who could be your actual soulmate. And this doesn't even just have to be romantic relationships. This can even be platonic relationships. Like some people are just in our lives for a season, and when you're like giving so much energy and time to that, like they're not even feeling the time and energy that you're putting into thinking
Right.
about a relationship that no longer exists. So imagine you redirected that time and energy, number one, into yourself, but number two, into the actual people that you wanted to attract into your life.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
When I was sorry, real quick, when I was leaving my job to go into my hypnotherapy business, it was like a minimum wage 20-hour a week, but it was all online. It was easy money, but I just didn't like it. And I was trying to talk to my husband that day, and I was like, I just don't know. I want to leave it. And he goes, listen, they're paying you minimum wage to not work on your business. And I was like, okay. Like, for some reason, the way that he said it was like the perfect way I needed to hear it. And it's absolutely true what you said. Like, imagine if you put all that effort and
I'm not sure I understand.
Siri is talking to me.
Siri is like,
Sorry.
I don't get it.
My Siri has an Irish accent, so just so you guys know.
That. I was like, is it?
Okay, shush. But the way that you said it was great. Like, imagine how much you could accomplish if you actually put all of that intention and emotion and effort into what you actually want. Like, imagine what could be possible. And I don't know why, but someone needs to hear that right now. So we need to reiterate it.
Yeah, boundaries are so important when it comes to manifestation, because if you don't have the space for what you're asking for, then where is it going to fit? It's
Right.
like wanting to buy some new dishes for your kitchen and everything's full. Like, yo, you got to clear out a cabinet and it'll be so much easier to fill it. Like, have you ever noticed in your house when there's empty spaces, they get filled?
Oh my
I feel like
gosh.
this is a universal law. Like, space likes to be filled, right? You're like, oh, there's nothing here. Let's put something here. Oh, this
My
closet's empty.
garage.
Let's put all my shit in there. It's like, it will get filled. And if your life is already filled with inauthentic stuff or stuff that's not in alignment for you anymore, or you're going on dates with people who you already know, like you're not into them, that's you violating your own boundaries and you're not
Yeah.
living in alignment with your preferences, right? So when you can be a boundary badass and live in alignment with those preferences, I prefer to date people who are like this. I would prefer this new set of dishes. Let's get rid of the old ones. You have so much more space and so much more, I don't know if control is too strong of a word, but that's the word that's coming.
Tension. And you can't allow what you want while you're still allowing what you don't want.
Also, did you use that hairdresser example? Because
No, I swear to God, it was a client. I swear.
a client slash
No,
Kelsey.
it totally
That's
was
how
a
I
client.
feel though. So I'm glad that you.
But when you
I'm glad
talk
that you said
about,
that.
I know, but when you talk about your story, I immediately think of her because the exact same thing just
I'm
happened.
also a hairstylist, Efia, in case you're wondering about that. So
She thought I was talking about her. I swear I wasn't.
Out right now. Oh man, that's really funny.
No.
Great.
But hey, if you like that nugget of advice, Kels, it's just for you. But it wasn't about you at all.
It wasn't, but it was. Hey there, we hope you're enjoying this episode so far, but if you want to listen to the whole thing, we're going to invite you over to our podcast. Either search for High Vibin' It on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you guys listen to podcasts, or even better, if you want to watch the extended video version of this episode that's even longer than the actual podcast itself, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/highvibe. Lindsay, tell them what's awesome about the Patreon.
Patreon is where we have all of our extended episodes. As Kelsey said, we have it on video, so you can actually see the things that we're talking about. Sometimes we have visual aids, and it's nice to know what we're talking about. We also have hangouts that we do sometimes that are exclusive to Patreon people. And you can get started with all of this and bonus content and everything that we have only for the Patreon people for as little as $3. I think it's $3.33 a month. And that's it. And you guys can get all the benefits and all access to everything that we put in there. Really cool.
It's really cool, really fun, super easy to join. And you guys don't even have to do that to finish this episode. If you're like, screw it, I don't want to pay any money, I just want to hear the rest of this episode, go to our podcast, High Vibin' It, search for it wherever you listen. It's totally free. Either way, enjoy the rest of the show wherever you choose to enjoy it. And we will see you guys next week because we do a new one every week. Adios.
Bye.